Hey, this is Heidi Dawson. If you love all things health and wellness and style of any kind, hang out here with me each week. I'm obsessed with never-ending improvement, and it's all in an effort to help each one of us live a wildly successful lifestyle. Subscribe today so you don't miss a thing. Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 433 of the Wildly Successful Lifestyle Podcast. Nice to be with you. Thank you for wanting to be the best version of you possible. You know, your mindset plays a really big role in that. Now, in my opinion, it's the cornerstone to a wildly successful life. You can't be truly successful without a positive mindset. And a positive mindset is something we got to work on every single day, just like our physical fitness or our nutrition. Now, for me, there have been times where as I got older, I thought, I'm not sure how people keep their sanity. Life can be so hard. But I realized that having that thought was part of my problem. I mean, telling myself things like, I can't handle this, or life is too hard, or I feel like I'm losing my mind. Those thoughts can lead to a negative thought spiral that will have you actually feeling like you're losing your mind, when things are usually nowhere near as bad as you think they are, and you're closer to things working out in your favor than you're allowing yourself to see. In other words, you're creating scenarios in your head that are far worse than the actual reality. When I was younger, I thought, man, everything's going to be great when I grow up. I mean, life is going to be so much fun, so much better because I get to do whatever I want. No one can tell me what I have to do or who I get to hang out with. I'd be so much happier once I'm in charge of myself. And then I got to be an adult. And I realized that being effortlessly happy was seeming almost at any given time a little bit elusive. I mean, I felt like problems seemed overwhelming and relationships were a little bit harder than they should be, and people disappointed me. I mean, why did life seem to be getting harder when I always thought it was going to get easier as an adult? And that's when I started noticing something, though. I noticed that things seemed harder because I was creating all of these scenarios in my head all the time, scenarios that didn't feel good. And I would mind read too, like try to mind read what other people were thinking. I would say, well, this person is thinking this about me, or this client thinks that, or I would single myself out as the only person with a certain problem, which made me feel isolated. Or I'd be thinking about all the bad things about someone to myself because I was mad at them or irritated instead of focusing on the good aspects of them. I noticed that most of my misery was like an imagined angry conversation with someone like my sister, or imagined scenarios where I'm left out of a family thing, or imagined horrible problems that could possibly occur on a project. I was literally creating my own misery in my head. Now, the actual event I was worried about wasn't that bad at all. The actual reality was nowhere near as bad. In an effort to try to protect us, our brain will often create imagined scenarios that kind of make us isolate so that we actually do protect ourselves from being miserable if that's what it thinks it's doing. But in turn, the isolation and the constant negative thought patterns are actually what makes us miserable. Have you ever had a fight with your spouse and you just really can't stand them at the moment? And your mind will just keep going over and over all the bad things they've ever said or done, to the point to where you're making things way worse than they are. I have. Well, I used to anyway, before I realized what I was doing. I mean, I was actually making a situation that wasn't that bad, come on, worse by creating those scenarios and thoughts in my head, by allowing those thoughts in my head. The thought pattern I was allowing would make me feel way worse than the actual argument we had had even. As adults, we do tend to focus on the negative a lot more than the positive. It's sort of a knee-jerk habit. Now, our brains are hardwired that way. I mean, why do you think bad news sells more? It's because it keeps us glued to the TV. It keeps us hyper-focused on the bad thing. And then our brain gets going thinking about what's the next bad thing coming. The media companies know this, and they know that we're wired that way, and so they take advantage of it by constantly coming up with worst-case scenarios and then pounding them into our heads through news and social media. But we can easily turn the TV off. We can easily uninstall the X app or the Facebook app. But how do we turn off those negative thoughts in our brain that seem to be there all the time, that seem to be automatic? How do we turn off the thoughts that have us hyper-focused on the negative, the thoughts that have us spiraling into making things way worse than they actually are? I was listening to Esther Hicks this week on YouTube, And she was telling a story of how she and her husband would play a game with her grandkids. And the grandkids would hide a button somewhere in the house, and Esther and Jerry would have to find it. Now, they would do this. The kids would give them hints. So if they got closer to the button, the kids would yell hotter. And if they got further away from it, the kids would yell colder. She said there was no way that they wouldn't find the button because the kids knew where it was and were giving them hints all along as to how to find it. And as long as they followed the hints, there it would be. So we used to play that game when I was young too. It was a really fun game. Now, the reason she told the story though was because she said life is constantly sending us hints too. Every single one of us gets those hints. And the more we follow the ones that feel good and right to us, the closer we get to everything we want. But it's all based on how we feel. I mean, if we're feeling really good most of the time and we're consistently allowing good thought patterns, then we're on our way and we're getting closer and closer to what we want. But if we're regularly feeling negative or feeling bad and having negative thought patterns, we're getting further and further from what we want. And most of us have no idea that we have these two parts of our brain that are fighting for control. I mean, one wants to keep us safe and isolated so that we never experience pain or discomfort. And the other part allows us to expand and explore and grow into the best version of ourselves. And they're constantly trying to overtake each other. The thing is, we control both sides, but one can be dominant. And whichever one that wins out in being dominant really does depict how our life is going to go. Our thoughts really do decide the quality of our life because it affects who we surround ourselves with and what we allow to happen. I mean, we think we're miserable because our partner said this or did this, or because this bad thing happened, or that bad person didn't cooperate. But ultimately, what's causing most of our misery is the way we're thinking about the things that happen in our everyday life. We just make them so much worse in our head. Most of us do a lot more than we think we do. I mean, we make things scarier or meaner or worse than they actually are all the time. And it's causing us unnecessary misery. And look, there's nothing wrong with you if you do this too. It's something most humans do. But being aware of it and changing it, that's our work. That's part of our work as a functioning, healthy, happy, sane human. I mean, we aren't going to completely be able to turn off negative thoughts, but we can catch them as they come and stop ourselves from spiraling. You'll know when you're starting to spiral because you'll notice you start feeling really bad. Like you'll be grumpy and not sure why. You'll be mad at your partner and not sure why. Until you stop and you just say, hold up. What's going on in my head right now that's making me feel so bad or having all these bad thoughts about my partner? We do it, right? The other day, it was a beautiful, gorgeous, sunny Saturday, and Eric, my husband, had been out of town all week, so I wanted to do something fun that day, and I expected that we were gonna. But Eric said, oh, honey, I really have to do our taxes because we have a meeting with the accountant on Monday. Now, I noticed my brain quickly started to want to say, well, he's just no fun. Why does he have to do that today? I caught myself, though, and I said, you know what? He has to do it today because he's been flying all week. He's been busy, and he's had no other time to do it, of course. That's not fun for him either on a sunny Saturday. You see, I noticed I was starting to go down a bad train of thought, and I caught myself. I ended up asking him if I could help him in any way, and he said, no, let me just get this done, and then we'll go have a fun night. And that's exactly what we did. So I finished reading a good book I had started, and he did the taxes. And it wasn't all that bad. It's not what either one of us wanted to do on a beautiful Saturday, but that was our reality for the day. That was what we had to do for the day. It was up to us how our attitude about it was going to go. We could be grumpy and do it, or we could be happy and do it. So we chose the latter. There are things in life we don't control. Making them worse by spiraling into a negative thought pattern is how most of us make things worse. It's how most of us create a lot of our own misery. My challenge to you this week is to notice at least once this week when you're allowing a thought pattern that is making a situation worse than it is, and then change it. At some point, we all have to do things we aren't crazy about, or we have an uncomfortable situation with a friend or a family member that isn't very pleasant. We want to blame the situation, but that puts the power of our happiness out of our control. It's our attitude about a situation that decides if we're going to be miserable or not. The Dalai Lama says, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Share this with 3 people that you wish to see happy. I love you guys. I'll talk to you in a few days. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends because we're just going to keep going bigger and better places together, and I love that about us. Talk to you in a few days.